The crack of a single gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Broken Ridge, Wyoming Territory, in 1878. But Yancy Vaughn hardly flinched as he reined his horse to a stop outside the general store. After 15 years working cattle across 3 states, it took more than distant gunfire to rattle him, though the sound of his twin 10-year-old boys arguing behind him was proving far more effective at testing his patience. "Samuel Thomas, that's enough," Yancy said firmly, turning in his saddle to eye his sons. "We're in town now. Best behavior like we discussed." The identical boys, with their father's dark hair and their late mother's hazel eyes, immediately straightened on their shared mount. "Yes, Pa," they answered in unison, though Samuel couldn't resist giving his brother a final, discreet elbow. Yancy dismounted with practiced ease despite the persistent ache in his right knee, a souvenir from a cattle drive gone wrong 3 summers ago. At 42, he was still strong and capable, but the years of hard living had begun to leave their mark on his weather-beaten face and in the premature streaks of gray at his temples. "Tie up the horses properly," he instructed his sons as they scrambled down. "Then you can each pick 1 candy stick from Mr. Henderson's jar, if you mind your manners." The prospect of sweets transformed the boys instantly from quarreling siblings to model citizens. They secured the horses with exaggerated care, standing a little straighter as they followed their father into the general store. The familiar bell chimed overhead as they entered, and Yancy nodded at old Henderson behind the counter. The store smelled of coffee beans, leather, and the peculiar mixture of dried goods that had become a comfort to him over the years. He pulled the supply list from his pocket: ammunition, coffee, flour, and several other necessities for their small ranch 10 miles outside of town. "Vaughn." "Good to see you and the boys," Henderson called. "Heard the news yet?" Yancy shook his head. "Been busy at the ranch." "What news?" "New folks moved into the old Peterson place last week. Widow woman and her little girl." Henderson leaned forward conspiratorially. "Name's Olivia Powell. Husband was some banker from Denver. Passed sudden like, I hear. She's come to start fresh." "Peterson place has been empty near 3 years," Yancy remarked, distracted by checking his list. "Needs a lot of work." "That it does." Henderson nodded. "She's hired young Davis to help with the major repairs, but word is she's determined to make a go of it herself. Pretty little thing, too. Can't be more than 30. Yancy merely grunted in response. The romantic entanglements of a city widow held little interest for a man who had spent the last 7 years raising twin boys alone after pneumonia had claimed his beloved wife, Sarah. He'd made peace with his solitary life, finding purpose in his modest ranch and the raising of his sons. "Samuel Thomas," he called, "pick your candy and then help me gather these supplies." The bell over the door chimed again, and despite himself, Yancy glanced up. The woman who entered seemed to bring the golden afternoon sunlight with her. She was indeed young, perhaps 30 or 31, with auburn hair neatly pinned beneath a modest bonnet. Her dress, though simple, was well made, and she carried herself with a quiet dignity that immediately commanded attention. A little girl of about 6 clung to her hand, with the same auburn hair and wide, curious eyes that darted around the store. "Mrs. Powell," Henderson greeted warmly. "How are you settling in?" "Slowly but surely, Mr. Henderson," she replied with a smile that transformed her face. Her voice carried the refined cadence of Eastern education, but there was a warmth to it that belied any pretension. "I've come for those seed packets you mentioned, and perhaps some advice on what might grow best in this soil." Of course," Henderson said, already moving toward his seed collection. The woman's eyes met Yancy's briefly across the store, and she offered a polite nod which he returned automatically. Her gaze then fell on the twins, who had temporarily forgotten about Candy and were openly staring at the newcomers. "Hello there," she said to the boys. "You must be quite the helpers for your father." Samuel found his voice first. "Yes, madam. I'm Samuel Vaughn, and this is my brother Thomas." "We're twins." "I can see that," she said with genuine warmth. "How wonderful to have a built-in best friend." "Sometimes," Thomas muttered, earning a chuckle from the woman. "I'm Olivia Powell," she said, then placed her hand gently on her daughter's shoulder. "And this is my daughter, Lily." The little girl offered a shy smile but pressed closer to her mother's skirts. Yancy stepped forward, removing his hat. "Yancy Vaughn, madam. Welcome to Broken Ridge." "Thank you, Mr. Vaughn," Olivia replied, and something in her direct gaze suggested she was accustomed to assessing people quickly. Whatever she saw in Yancy seemed to satisfy her, as her expression softened slightly. "I understand you ranch outside of town." "Yes, madam." "Small cattle operation about 10 miles east." "We have horses too," Samuel piped up, "and Pa lets us help with everything." "Everything except branding and breaking," Thomas corrected. "Pa says we have to be 12 for that." A gentle smile touched Olivia's lips. "Your father sounds very wise." She turned back to Yancy. "Mr. Henderson tells me you've been in the area for some time. I was hoping to find someone knowledgeable about local conditions. The property I've purchased needs considerable attention." "Peterson Place has good water," Yancy offered. "Land's fertile enough if worked proper." "So I'm told, though I'm discovering daily how much I don't know about country living." A flicker of vulnerability crossed her face before her composure returned. "We're managing, though, aren't we, Lily?" The little girl nodded solemnly. "Mama fixed the chicken coop all by herself yesterday, but the hammer was very heavy." Something about the child's earnest pride in her mother stirred an unexpected warmth in Yancy's chest. It had been years since he'd felt anything beyond his devotion to his sons and his responsibility to his ranch. "If you need assistance," he found himself saying, "I could spare an hour or two next time we're in town, just to look things over, offer some advice." The offer surprised him as much as it seemed to surprise her. "That's very kind," Olivia said carefully. "I wouldn't want to impose. No imposition, just neighboring." Yancy cleared his throat. "We'll be back on Wednesday for the mail. Could stop by on our way home if it suits." A brief hesitation then. "Wednesday would be fine. Thank you, Mr. Vaughn." Their business concluded shortly thereafter, and Yancy herded his suddenly talkative sons back outside to load their supplies. He couldn't help but notice how both boys kept glancing back at the store, clearly intrigued by the newcomers. "She seems nice," Samuel ventured as they secured their goods. "And sad," Thomas added with surprising perception. "Like you used to be, Pa, before you got better." Yancy looked at his son, momentarily taken aback by the observation. Had he been that transparent in his grief? And when exactly had he gotten better? The loss of Sarah still ached, but Thomas was right, the crushing weight had gradually lifted enough for him to function, to find moments of joy in raising their sons. "People get sad when they lose someone they love," Yancy said simply. "It takes time to heal. You think she'll like our help?" Samuel asked. "I expect she will," Yancy replied, mounting his horse. "Now let's head home. Those fences on the north pasture won't fix themselves." As they rode out of town, Yancy found his thoughts repeatedly drifting to the widow's direct gaze and the quiet strength she exuded, despite her obvious displacement in this rugged country. There was something compelling about a woman willing to start anew in such challenging circumstances. Wednesday couldn't come quickly enough for the twins, who had talked of little else besides their upcoming visit to the Peterson, now Powell place. By the time they had collected their mail and headed east out of town toward the widow's homestead, Yancy had been treated to endless speculation about what they might find there. The property came into view. As they crested a small rise, a modest cabin with outbuildings nestled against a backdrop of cottonwoods that marked the creek running through the back of the property. As they drew closer, Yancy could see the considerable work that had already been done. New shingles patched the roof, the porch had fresh boards, and a tidy vegetable garden had been marked out with string. Olivia emerged from the cabin as they approached, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. She wore a simple work dress with sleeves rolled to her elbows and her hair restrained in a practical bun. Somehow, the practical attire only enhanced her natural grace. "Mr. Vaughn," she called, walking to meet them. "You're true to your word." Yancy dismounted, tipping his hat. "Mrs. Powell." Little Lily appeared in the doorway, brightening at the sight of the twins. After a questioning glance at her mother, who nodded permission, she darted forward. "You want to see our chickens?" she asked the boys. Samuel and Thomas looked to their father, who nodded. "Go on, but mind your manners and do as Mrs. Powell says." The children scampered off toward the chicken coop, Lily's voice carrying back as she proudly explained her responsibility for feeding the birds each morning. "Your sons are well-mannered," Olivia observed. "That speaks well of their upbringing." "They're good boys," Yancy acknowledged. "Their mother would be proud of them." Olivia's expression softened. "Mr. Henderson mentioned, 'I'm sorry for your loss.'" 7 years this past winter," Yancy said simply. "And yours is more recent, I understand." 14 months. She glanced away briefly. Edward's heart failed suddenly. The doctors said there was nothing to be done. "It's never easy," Yancy offered, knowing the inadequacy of words in the face of such loss. "No," she agreed. "But we endure." She straightened her shoulders. "Now, would you be willing to look at my barn? The roof seems sound, but there's a persistent leak I can't locate." Yancy spent the next hour examining the property, identifying critical repairs and suggesting priorities. Olivia listened attentively, asking intelligent questions that revealed both her unfamiliarity with rural life and her determination to learn. "The well pump needs new leather gaskets," he explained, demonstrating the problem. "It's a simple fix. I have spares at my ranch I could bring next time." "I appreciate the advice, but I can purchase my own supplies," Olivia said firmly. "I didn't invite you here to provide handouts." Yancy nodded, respecting her pride. "Of course, Henderson should have what you need, but replacing them is tricky the first time. I could show you how." She regarded him for a moment, then nodded. "I would welcome the instruction, thank you." She hesitated. "Would you and your boys stay for supper? It's only stew, but there's plenty." The invitation surprised him. "No need to feed us, please," she said. "Lily and I. We don't have many opportunities for company. It would be nice." Something in her expression, a flicker of the loneliness she usually kept carefully concealed, made it impossible to refuse. "We'd be honored." Supper proved to be far more than only stew. The meal was flavorful and abundant, served on fine china that looked distinctly out of place in the rustic cabin but hinted at Olivia's previous life. The children chatted easily, with Lily gradually emerging from her shyness under the twins' friendly attention. "This is delicious, madam," Yancy said, accepting a second helping. "Thank you. Cooking was one skill my mother insisted I learn despite my father's position." She smiled faintly. "She said a woman should never be entirely dependent on servants. Wise woman." She was. Olivia glanced at Lily, who was giggling at something Thomas had whispered. "I'm grateful for her foresight now." As the meal concluded, Samuel looked around the small cabin. "Mrs. Powell, do you have a swing for Lily?" Olivia shook her head. "No, I'm afraid not." "Every kid needs a swing," Thomas declared with the certainty of youth. "Pa, couldn't we build one? There's that perfect cottonwood by the creek. Yancy started to demur, but Olivia interjected. That's very thoughtful, but I couldn't impose further on your father's time. It's not an imposition if we want to do it, Samuel argued. Right, Pa? Yancy found himself caught between his son's eager faces and Olivia's proud hesitation. The boys are right about that cottonwood. Perfect branch for a swing. Wouldn't take more than an hour. Please, Mama. Lily asked, her eyes bright with hope. I've never had a swing before. Olivia's resistance visibly melted at her daughter's excitement. If Mr. Vaughn is certain it's no trouble. We'll come back Saturday, Yancy decided. Bring the rope and tools needed. The boys cheered, and even Lily clapped her hands in delight. But it was Olivia's smile, genuine and unguarded, that caught Yancy's attention. For a moment, he glimpsed the carefree young woman she must have been before grief and responsibility had weighed her down. True to his word, Yancy returned with the twins on Saturday morning, the wagon loaded with tools and a length of sturdy rope. They found Olivia already hard at work in her garden, her face flushed with exertion beneath a wide-brimmed hat. You're here, Lily called, running from where she'd been placing stones along the garden border. Is it time for my swing? It sure is, Samuel replied, jumping down from the wagon. We brought everything we need. The morning passed in pleasant industry. Yancy selected the perfect branch while the twins helped Lily gather smooth boards from the old fence pile that could be sanded down for the seat. Olivia provided cool water and occasionally offered suggestions, but mostly watched with quiet appreciation as the project took shape. By midday, Yancy was securing the final knots while the children watched with barely contained excitement. The swing hung perfectly from the sturdy branch, its smooth wooden seat suspended at just the right height. Who wants to try it first? Yancy asked, though the answer was obvious from Lily's hopeful expression. Lily should go first, Samuel said generously. It's her swing. The little girl approached almost reverently, touching the rope with tentative fingers before climbing onto the seat. Yancy showed her how to hold the ropes properly, then gave her a gentle push. Her delighted laughter as she swung back and forth was infectious, bringing smiles to everyone's faces. Higher, Mr. Vaughn, please higher, she called. Yancy obliged, pushing with careful strength until she was soaring in satisfying arcs beneath the cottonwood. The sight of the child's unbridled joy stirred something long dormant in his chest, a lightness he hadn't felt in years. When he glanced at Olivia, he found her watching not her daughter but him. There were tears in her eyes, though her smile remained steady. Thank you, she said quietly, stepping closer so the children wouldn't hear. It's been so long since I've seen her this happy. Kids need simple joys, Yancy replied. Glad we could provide one. It isn't just the swing, Olivia said. It's having others around, being part of something. She hesitated. Edward was a good man, but his work consumed him. Lily didn't have much time with him, and after he died. She shook her head. Denver held too many painful memories. I thought a fresh start would help us both heal. Brave decision, Yancy said. Not many would choose such a difficult path. Some days I wonder if I've made a terrible mistake. The admission seemed to surprise her as much as him. But then, I see moments like this, and I think perhaps we can find happiness here after all. Their conversation was interrupted as the twins took their turns on the swing, showing Lily how to pump her legs to go higher without assistance. Soon all three children were taking turns, their laughter echoing across the property. Olivia insisted they stay for lunch sandwiches, and fresh lemonade served at the small table on the newly repaired porch. As they ate, Yancy found himself sharing stories of his early days ranching, amused by Olivia's genuine interest and insightful questions. The boys should see more of the ranch soon, she remarked, watching the children who had returned to the swing. "Lily needs friends, and they've been so kind to her." "You're welcome anytime," Yancy found himself saying. "It's not much compared to city life, but the boys could show Lily the new calves. She might enjoy that." "I'm sure she would." Olivia met his eyes directly. "And I admit, I could use the occasional adult conversation that doesn't revolve around merchandise or town gossip." Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of mutual interest that transcended mere neighborly courtesy. Yancy recognized it with a mixture of surprise and cautious pleasure. "Sunday dinner," he suggested. "If you'd care to join us, nothing fancy, mind you." "We'd be delighted," she replied, her smile warming her entire face. Over the weeks that followed, a pattern emerged. The Powell women began joining the Vaughns for Sunday dinners, and Yancy found reasons to visit their homestead, regularly bringing seedlings from his garden, offering advice on livestock, or simply stopping by on his way to or from town. Each visit revealed new facets of Olivia that impressed him. Her determination as she tackled difficult tasks, her patient teaching as Lily learned to read, her unexpected humor that emerged more frequently as she became comfortable in their company. Most of all, he admired the courage it had taken to leave everything familiar behind and forge a new life for herself and her daughter. The twins flourished under her attention as well. Samuel, always the more reserved of the two, particularly seemed to blossom when Olivia asked his opinion or praised his efforts. Thomas delighted in making Lily laugh with his antics, assuming the role of protective older brother with natural ease. By early autumn, the Powell homestead had transformed. The vegetable garden had yielded a respectable harvest. The cabin sported new curtains and a fresh coat of paint. The chicken flock had doubled, and a milk cow now grazed contentedly in the small pasture. But the most significant changes weren't in the property itself, but in its inhabitants. Lily no longer hid behind her mother when visitors arrived. Olivia's shoulders had lost their perpetual tension, and she laughed more freely. The shadows of grief hadn't disappeared entirely for either of them, but they had receded, making room for new joys. The same was true for Yancy and his sons. Their ranch had always been well run, but their home had lacked the warmth that now greeted visitors. Fresh flowers on the table, cookies in the jar, books and games in the evenings rather than silent efficiency. "Pa's smiling again," Yancy overheard Thomas telling Samuel one evening as they prepared for bed. "Like he used to when Ma was alive." "Do you think he loves Mrs. Powell?" Samuel asked. "Course he does," Thomas replied with certainty. "And she loves him too. You can tell by how they look at each other when they think no one's watching." Yancy stepped away silently, his heart racing. Was it that obvious? He hadn't spoken of his growing feelings for Olivia, uncertain if she could ever return them or if she was ready for such a step. But his son's observation forced him to acknowledge what he'd been avoiding. He had indeed fallen in love with the determined widow, who had brought unexpected joy back into their lives. The realization prompted action. The next day, he rode alone to the Powell homestead, arriving just as Olivia was hanging laundry in the autumn sunshine. Lily was at her lesson with the schoolteacher in town, giving them a rare moment of privacy. "Yancy," Olivia greeted him, using his first name as she'd begun to do in recent weeks. "This is a pleasant surprise. Thought we might talk," he said, suddenly nervous as he dismounted. "If you have a moment," she nodded, setting aside her laundry basket. "Is something wrong?" "No," he assured her quickly. "Nothing wrong, just—" He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "Olivia, I've come to care for you, more than as a friend or neighbor." Her expression softened, but she remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I know it might be too soon," he pressed on. "And I'll understand if you're not ready or if your feelings don't match mine. But I needed you to know that you and Lily have become precious to me, to all of us." "Yancy," she began, her voice gentle. "When Edward died, I thought that part of my life was over. I came here seeking peace, not—" She gestured between them. "Not this." His heart sank, but he nodded acceptance. "I understand." "No, you don't," she said, stepping closer. "I wasn't looking for love, but it found me anyway. In you. In your kindness to Lily. In the way you've welcomed us into your life without ever making me feel like a charity case." Hope surged through him. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying that I care for you too," she admitted with a smile. "Deeply. The boys were right about that swing, you know. It wasn't just Lily who needed it. Watching you that day, seeing how naturally you brought happiness back into our lives, that's when I first felt my heart opening again." Yancy reached for her hand, which she gave willingly. "I never thought I'd find this feeling again after Sarah died." "Never looked for it." "Neither did I," she agreed, "but perhaps that's how it happens. When we stop searching so desperately, we create space for unexpected blessings." "The boys adore you," he said. "And Lily. She's become so special to all of us. They've given her something I couldn't provide alone, a sense of belonging, of family." Olivia's eyes shimmered with emotion. "What happens now, Yancy?" He considered the question carefully. "We take our time. No need to rush, but I'd like to court you properly if you're willing." Her laugh was warm and genuine. "Court me? After all we've been through together these past months, call me old-fashioned," he said with a smile, "but I want to do this right." "Then yes," she replied, squeezing his hand. "I would be honored to be courted by you, Yancy Vaughn." Their courtship progressed through the winter months with the blessing of their children, who could barely contain their excitement at the prospect of becoming a true family. By spring, when the cottonwood once again leafed out over Lily's beloved swing, Yancy proposed properly, with a simple gold band and the promise of a shared future. They married on a perfect June day in 1879, beneath that very cottonwood tree. The ceremony was small but joyful, with the children serving as attendants and the whole town joining in the celebration afterward. As they exchanged vows, Yancy marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment, how grief had shaped them both, but hadn't defined them. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher declared, and the gathered crowd erupted in cheers as Yancy kissed his bride. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Yancy found himself watching as the twins pushed Lily on her swing, her delighted laughter carrying across the homestead that was now their shared home. Olivia slipped her hand into his, following his gaze. "Who would have thought," she said softly, "that a simple wooden swing could be the beginning of so much happiness?" "The boys knew," Yancy replied, drawing her closer. "They saw what I couldn't yet see, that you were exactly what we needed to be whole again. And you were what Lily and I needed." She rested her head against his shoulder. "A second chance at family, at love." As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the cottonwood leaves, Yancy Vaughn looked at his expanded family, his sons, his new daughter, and the remarkable woman who had restored his capacity for joy, and felt a contentment so complete it nearly overwhelmed him. The grief that had once seemed insurmountable had given way to something beautiful and unexpected, a blended family forged through compassion, built on understanding, and bound together by love that had found them when they least expected it. And it had all begun with his boys' simple insistence that every child deserved a swing, and their recognition that the widow who had entered their lives had somehow made their father smile again.